Okay, hi everybody. We'll be starting the webinar today. So today we'll be talking about the commercial potentials of vacuum fried dried dilis, the cost and return and sensitivity analysis. We will be featuring, or today, Dr. Lemuel Diamante will be the one hosting the webinar. Before we start, of course, reminders. Number one, please keep your cameras turned on during the webinar, or if ever when your internet connectivity permits. Number two, mute your microphones at all times. Turn it on only when asked. And the last one is for those with questions, please do type them in the chat box during the question and answer. So here is Dr. Lemuel Diamante. He actually has experienced 30 years in the industry. He specializes in food drying and processing and packaging, as well as bioactives extraction from dairy materials. He's awarded grants reaching more than 1 million, that is like around 35 million pesos. And he also participated in multiple researches, both in the Philippines and abroad. So we'll be starting now after this slide. So please welcome Sir Lemuel Diamante. Okay, sir, you can start.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm not controlling the slides, am I?
We're controlling the slides, sir.
Okay. So can you start with the first slide, please?
Sure.
Okay. The title of my webinar is, as mentioned, the commercial potentials of vacuum fried dilis. This is for mga Tagalog, or bulinaw for the Visayans. Take note, I specified vacuum fried dried dilis because in this processing, instead of fresh bulinaw or dilis, we will be starting with already the dried dilis. So I did cost and return and sensitivity analysis to see how the various factors affect the profitability of the process. Next, please. Okay, my first several slides, I've actually presented this already in my previous slide webinar on vacuum frying of seafoods. But anyway, for those who have not attended that, let's review again. So vacuum frying of foods involves the evaporation of moisture from the interior of the I didn't see of the material, resulting in a dried product. The drying medium is hot oil, unlike a hot air dryer where it's hot air. This one is oil, but it is still a drying process. Because the reason where hot oil is used, because it has a high heat transfer coefficient, which therefore speeds up the drying process. So the drying process takes place in a closed chamber under vacuum. And as we know, the atmospheric pressure is 101.333 kilopascal. So the pressure inside the chamber will be less than the 101.3 kilopascal. As you drop the pressure down, the boiling point of water will reduce accordingly. Next, please. So for example, if the chamber pressure of the vacuum fryer is reduced to about 2 kilopascal, or it's like saying 101 minus 2, so that's about a negative 98 kilopascal. So that's why it's called a vacuum, because it's a negative pressure. So when that happens, the boiling point of water inside the chamber is only 18 degrees centigrade. Therefore, you can drive out the moisture inside the product at a much lower temperature. So the chamber can be brought to very low pressure using a vacuum pump. So this is an integral part of the vacuum fryer. You have to have a vacuum pump. In addition, the vacuum pump facilitates the removal of evaporated moisture out of the chamber, because you need to, as the moisture evaporates, it gets sucked in the vacuum pump, so that it is brought outside. Next, please. So here are two. On the left side is a schematic diagram of a vacuum fryer, and on the right side is the picture of an actual vacuum fryer. So if we concentrate on the left side, so this big chamber here is the vacuum frying chamber. And as I've said, we need a vacuum pump. So it is connected to a vacuum pump to reduce the pressure in the vacuum chamber once the sample is already inside. But in starting the vacuum frying process, the product will first be suspended above the oil. So take note, this picture right now, the frying basket has already been submerged into the hot oil. So at the start, the food product to be fried will be suspended above the oil. Then the oil will be heated to the required temperature. As we go on, I will mention that the usual temperature, usually for seafoods, it will be 100 degrees or higher to speed up the drying process. And then once the temperature reaches, you also turn on the vacuum pump to reduce the pressure. So once the required temperature and vacuum or negative pressure is reached, then you lower the food product, and then you will get the evaporation of moisture until eventually, for a certain length of time, the food product will dry out. So once it reaches the required time, and usually the required time will be determined by actual experiment. So meaning there will be several evaluations to work out how long you need to fry. Then you take out again the product out of the oil, and in some equipment, some vacuum fryers, they have a way of rotating this basket so that it releases the oil. But on the right side is an actual vacuum fryer from DOST. I'm not sure if the DOST vacuum fryer has a spinning motor on top to spin the basket of fried product. But basically, that's how it looks like. So in the DOST fryer, they have an oil reservoir, because sometimes they have to pump out the oil out of this, because sometimes the heating of the oil is done outside, and then it's just going to be pumped inside. Okay, next please. Next slide, please. So the seafood, in this case, the seafood sample will be the dilis or the bulinaw, can either be in frozen forms. For those who have attended my first webinar on vacuum frying of fruits, generally when it's fruits and vegetables, it is suggested that the product or the material is frozen prior to frying. But for seafoods, you can also freeze it, but I realized that maybe we can just process a dried bulinaw already, or dried dilis, because there's a lot of that in the market. And what's good about starting with the dried dilis it will have less moisture already. So therefore, the frying process will be faster, and therefore, for a given period of time, you'll be able to vacuum fry more products in a given time. I already mentioned this two sentences previously, so we can just go to the next slide, please. Again, so as I've said, the basket will be raised and then lowered and fried. So after the pressure of the vacuum fryer will be adjusted to atmospheric, because what happens is when the frying chamber is under vacuum, even if you want to open the chamber, you cannot open it because it's under vacuum. There's a suction. So what you need to do is you turn off the vacuum pump, and then there's a relief valve to release the pressure inside, so that the atmospheric pressure will equalize with the negative pressure on the chamber. And as I've said, because you're starting with a dried dilis, so the moisture in the dry dilis is much lower compared when you're vacuum frying a frozen dilis or a fresh dilis. So therefore, the frying time will be faster. At the same time, you can use higher temperature, usually above 100 degrees centigrade, because we want the dilis, the vacuum fried dilis, to be slightly brownish in color to indicate that it's cooked, to make it more palatable. Next, please. So because of the very short drying time, the properties and nutrient qualities of the products, the vacuum fried products, will be excellent. However, there are some disadvantages of vacuum frying of seafoods, including residual oil in the products, which has implication on its storage ability, as well as the cost of processing and packaging of the product. However, the competing products for a vacuum fried, I've seen in Shopee Philippines and Lazada Philippines, they're selling fried dilis already, ready-to-eat dilis. And all of these are fried using deep frying, so therefore they have also oil. But I assure you that the vacuum fried dilis product will have much lower oil than the atmospheric or just the ordinary fried dilis. Also, based on my experience, next please, next slide. Based also on my experience, even with the presence of oil in vacuum fried products, the taste is still acceptable, as because we're used already to eating fried dilis usually in the morning, and it's just an ordinary frying. So much more if you're using vacuum frying, the oil will be much less. In addition, frying in the absence of air during the vacuum frying, because it's under vacuum, so it's not open to air, it inhibits lipid oxidation and non-enzymatic browning. So there is less deterioration in the fried product. Next, please. If you look at on the left side of the slide, these are example of not vacuum fried dilis. These are just ordinary fried dilis. So they just use ordinary frying. So vacuum fried foods have lower oil contents than product produced by conventional atmospheric frying. So by the way, when I say atmospheric frying, that is just the ordinary frying that we all know. However, a vacuum fryer is an expensive equipment compared with other processing equipment like the atmospheric deep fryer. So that's the drawback. You have a better quality of fried product, but it is an expensive process because of the equipment involved. Because of the presence of oil in vacuum fried products, these need to be packaged in an aluminum laminate bags for longer shelf life, which are more costly than just plastic bags. But based also on my experience, if you know that the turnover of your product is faster, like it could be sold in the next 3 months, then you can just use even a thick plastic bag. It will already do the trick. You don't have to use laminate bags. However, if you're not sure of when your product will be sold out, so it is best to pack them in aluminum laminate bags, as I've mentioned there at the bottom of the slide. Next, please. In the Philippines, the vacuum fried technology is already around more than 20 years, because I pretty much remember when I was still at Visayas State University, I started working on vacuum frying around before 2000, and now we're 2021, so that means it's really more than 20 years now. And however, until now, the vacuum fried seafoods, which DOST actually is promoting, like the mussels, the barindai, the dilis, are still not readily available in shops, even in online shops like Shopee Philippines, Lazada Philippines. They're not easily available. What's commonly sold in there are just the ordinary fried dilis, which are sometimes buttered, or it has some crispy butter to make it more crispy. So there is the vacuum fried dilis or seafoods is not readily available. So there is a very good potential for this product if available in greater quantity. Next. So here are examples that I found in the internet, and I think these are processed in the Philippines. So there's one here, the vacuum fried dilis. I think this was processed either in Luzon or in Mindanao. And here is a vacuum fried clams or barindai, and here is the vacuum fried tahong. So these are all processed in the Philippines, but if you look for it in online stores, it's not readily available. Next. Vacuum frying of seafoods in the Philippines in greater volume is highly viable since the country have abundant seafood companies, seafood supplies, as shown by, I found that there are about 38 big commercial seafood companies in the Philippines that can provide the needed raw materials for processing. And actually, I also decided that instead of processing fresh or frozen dilis, I would process the dried dilis already. There are, even if you just check on Shopee Philippines or Lazada Philippines, there's a lot of suppliers already of this dried dilis, and they even specify that this is slightly salted dilis, less salty dilis. So those are the kinds of dry dilis that can be processed in the vacuum fryer, so that it's not very salty once processed. So therefore, there is a high potential for greater volume of production for vacuum fried seafood in the Philippines domestic market, and even in the international market by offering these products online. Like if I checked on eBay, most of the vacuum fried products they have are mostly fruits and vegetables. Seldom that I have seen seafood products. So there's a lot of commercial potential for this product, not only in the Philippines, but also in the foreign markets. Next. Okay, vacuum fried seafoods are highly nutritious products that are rich in protein, as we know, because it's a protein food. But it is also high in calcium, zinc, and various trace elements, and even bioactives. I think my last webinar was on fish-based nutraceuticals, which are bioactives. And I've mentioned there that if you have a way of processing the bones of fish, then there's lots of bioactives in the bone, and as well as the guts inside. So, especially for dried dilis, which is dried whole, so all the guts and everything inside is within. So therefore, those are, it is rich in bioactive. Therefore, if you process the whole dried dilis, you get to process as well the bones and the dried guts inside, which therefore follows that there are bioactives present in this. Not only nutritious, but it is also it has also the bioactives that can help in various ailments of that we experience, like for example, hypertension, and also good for osteoporosis and so on. As you know, bioactives are compounds that promote good health because of the product's great taste, crunchy texture, appealing color and appearance, availability in a convenient state, right? The product can be stored even at room temperature because it is in the dried form. So the products are highly palatable. And therefore, there is really a big commercial potential for this product, not only locally, not only in the Philippines, but as I've said, even abroad. Next, please. Oh, I think we jumped 2 slides. Can you come back 1 slide more before? Okay. Vacuum frying of seafoods have lesser restriction compared to vacuum frying of fruits. If you recall my previous webinar, fruits have the tendency to turn brown because of the presence of sugar. So therefore, you need to process it at a much lower temperature, usually 90 degrees or less. But for seafoods, you even want for it to be partly brown so that it would look more palatable, more that it looks cooked. So therefore, you can use, as I've said in my previous slides, that you can use higher temperature above 100. I've seen some studies where they use even as high as 115 degrees centigrade. So therefore, the higher the temperature, the frying process will be very, very fast. Probably instead of 30 minutes, it could be less than 30 minutes. So the frying temperature for seafoods can be done at, as I've said, above 100 degrees C because seafood products need to develop some browning or redness on their surfaces to become more palatable. As a result, the required drying time is shorter and usually less than 30 minutes and would therefore lead to more products processed in a day compared to vacuum fried fruits. When I say like this, it means that in an 8-hour operation, you can process instead of roughly 8 batches, you could process probably more than 8 batches in an 8-hour day because of the shorter processing time. Vacuum fried seafoods are also expected to sell at a much higher price than vacuum fried fruits because it can serve both as a snack, which is a very nutritious snack, high protein, or as a dish, meaning you can eat it like the standard fried dilis in the morning for breakfast, but it's already in a convenient form. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I will be showing table 1, which is showing the cost and return analysis for vacuum frying of dried dilis or golinaw based on a 10 kilogram capacity of the DOST Merck MIRDC vacuum fryer. This is after a year operation. Based on the assumptions that I used, you will have a profit at the end of the year of 1.654 million, because the rate of return on the capital cost is 136.64%, with a payback period of 0.73 years. So in less than 1 year, you can recoup already the capital cost that you spent, like the vacuum fryer and other equipment. And the break-even price is 156.89 per pack of 100-gram pack, meaning you need to sell above this price. So what are the assumptions I used in this cost and return? First, labor cost. So I assume there a labor cost of 2,500 a day. You will see in the next table. In that 2,500 a day, I have 3 workers at 500 pesos a day, and a supervising worker paid at 1,000 pesos a day, which will total up to 2,005 for 1 day. So that's for 4 people. Then the number of batches processed per day is 8. Why 8? Because in an 8-hour operation, you will probably use about 45 minutes for each batch, meaning loading, frying, and then unloading of the product. And then you put in the next batch, so you can do 8 batches in a day. Also, the cost of the dry dilis, I looked this up, actual from Shopee Philippines and Lazada Philippines, I think. The average price of a dry dilis, 1 kilogram, is 400 pesos. It's a little expensive compared with fresh dilis. However, the drawback of processing fresh dilis, you need to freeze it. Otherwise, if you cannot process it right away, it will spoil. What's good about processing of dry dilis is you can just have the baskets of dry dilis sitting in your plant without any refrigeration, because that's how dried fish are sold in the market. They're just out there in the open. Also, the amount of vacuum fried dilis per batch is 10 kilogram, because as I've said, the DOST vacuum fryer has a capacity of 10 kilos per batch of frying. I assume the product yield of the raw materials to be 40% of the raw material. So meaning if you process 10 kilos, you will produce about 4 kilos of dried product. How did I come to this assumption? It's because I had done vacuum frying of different seafoods, and roughly most of them were about 30+% of yield. And those are frozen seafoods, not dried. So I am pretty sure that the yield of 40% is very doable. Of course, that needs to be. And also, I priced the 100 gram of vacuum fried dilis at 175. I have compared this with imported vacuum fried jackfruit. The only vacuum fried product that I've seen in Shopee Philippines and Lazada Philippines is vacuum fried jackfruit only. I've not seen any vacuum fried seafood, but I've seen fried dilis, and it's selling at around 150 pesos per 100 gram pack. So I assume that at 175, because we have a better quality than the ordinary fried dilis, and also the imported vacuum fried jackfruit is selling at about 200 pesos per 100 gram pack. So that price of 175 is really realistic. Also, the cost per container of a 5-liter cooking oil is, on the average, is 500 pesos. So that's from actual, from the website of the Shopee Philippines and Lazada Philippines. Roughly, it's about 500 pesos per 5-liter container. Next, please. So the table, the table 1 now, please. Next, please. I don't know if you can see the whole thing, but on the left side, these are the assumptions. So these are, I already mentioned this, that the 2005 labor cost was for 3 workers at 500 pesos each and 1 supervising worker at 1,000 pesos each, so 2005. Cost of the dried dilis is 400 pesos per kilogram. It batches in a day of processing. The vacuum fried dilis per batch is 10 kilos. Total containers of oil, of cooking oil. So I work out the total containers is roughly 288 per week, because during the process of frying, you're going to top up also the oil, because some of the oil, of course, will get carried with the product, as well as some of it will get carried over to the vacuum pump. So roughly 288 containers for, this is for 1 year operation actually. Then the cost per container is 500 pesos per container, as I've mentioned. And then the product yield, so that is when you process 10 kilos of dried dilis, 4 kilogram of vacuum fried dilis will come out. And then if it is to be packed at 100-gram pack, and the price of the product will be sold at 175. So remember the break-even price I mentioned, it's about 156 point something. So if you sell above that, then you are going to make profit. So here, the DOST vacuum fryer, as of last time I saw, it's sold at about 1 million. Then you need a number of other equipment like continuous bun sealer. This is after you pack the vacuum fried product, you need to pass it through a bun sealer so that it will just continuously seal the different bags. Then you need a balance, you need stainless steel table, working tables. You'll need steel cabinets for storing the products. And I assume a contingency of 5%. So the contingency will cover whatever unforeseen equipment needed. For the operating 1-year operation, so you consider that the total price of the dry dilis to be processed is about 7 million. This is for 1 year. Oh, by the way, let me point out the assumption for the processing. So as I already mentioned, it's 8 hours per day. However, it's only 20 days per month, meaning you are only processing 4 weeks. So that's only 4 weeks in a month, and only 11 months per year. So that means it's not a 12 months operation. It's only 11 months. But these are the operating costs that you will incur as a result of those assumptions. So the cooking oil will cost you about 1.584 million for 1 year. The packaging, I assume this only as a percentage of the capital cost. It is 20% of the 1.306 million. So you'll need at least 261,000.345 pesos. The building rental, I assume that you don't own the building, so you will be renting at, I think this is at 25,000 pesos per month. So you'll have 300,000. Of course, you'll have to pay 12 months instead of 11 months because your equipment is inside that building. And then you have depreciation at 10% of the capital cost, utilities assumed to be 20%. So the utilities will include LPG because you need LPG for heating the oil in the vacuum fryer. You'll need also electricity to run the vacuum pump and also the sealers and the band sealers and others that needs electricity, of course, the lights. And then repairs and maintenance is assumed to be 10% of the capital cost. So the labor cost will cost you about 550,000 for the 11 months of operation for those 4 people. You'll need also to budget about 10% of the capital cost as for your advertising. And then you need to pay for the interest on capital roughly at 10% of the capital cost. So that grand total, including contingencies, is 11 million for 1 year of operating expenses. So I don't know if people can see, but can I ask the admin to clear this because the economic indicators are shown on the right side here and it's covered with the participants and myself. Can we clear this portion here so that they can see? Can we transfer it on the left side? But anyway, if you cannot see, I will just read from my notes. So the revenue will be 12 million. So how did I come up with that 12 million? So you work out the total number of packs of 100-gram packs multiplied by 175. It will total up to 12.7 million. So that's why the result is the profit will be about 1.654 million in 1 year. And the rate of return on the capital cost is 136.64%. The payback period is 0.73 year or about just over 8 months. The break-even price, as I've said, is 156.89 per pack. So I put the project cost here as 4.088 million. How did I work that out? So it's the capital cost, this 1.306 million, plus 3 months of operating cost. The 3 months of operating cost will cost you 2.761 million. But if you can sell all the products processed during the 3 months, you will have a revenue of 3.175 million. It means that after 3 months of operation, it will now become self-sustaining because you are able to generate more than the 2.761 million in 3 months of operation. So that will now continue until the end of the year. So you need about 4 million for capital and a 3 months operating cost. That's the capital, the amount involved. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so what I did is I carried out sensitivity analysis on the cost and return for vacuum frying of dried dilis or bulinaw through the varied assumption or factors, and then deriving the profit, the rate of return, the payback period, and the break-even price. Remember? So what are these various factors or assumptions? So one of these is the labor cost. If you, if you recall, then the cost of the dry dilis when you buy those, and then the cost of containers of oil. So all of this, our objective is to have lower labor cost, lower cost of dry dilis, and lower cost of oil in order for your processing to be more profitable. While for the batches per day, amount of vacuum fried dilis per batch, the product yield and the price of vacuum fried dilis per pack should be higher. Meaning, your objective for this is the higher this is, the more profitable the operation. So for the economic indicators, it is desired to have a positive change in the profit. So meaning, when the profit is positive, you are making money, as well as the rate of return should be positive. Because if your rate of return is negative, that means you'll have a decreased revenue. While achieving negative change for the payback period, the shorter the payback period, the better. So you need a negative change in the payback period, as well as the break-even price. Because if your break-even price is lower, the lower that you can sell your product and still make the profit. So tables 2A and 2B present the summary of this sensitivity analysis of the cost and return for vacuum frying of dried dilis or bulinaw. Let's see, table 2A. Okay, so I have to put the table in two parts because I could not show all the 7 factors. So in this 2A, this only covers these factors: the labor cost, the batches per day, the cost of dry dilis, and the vacuum fried dilis per batch processed. So if you see here, the middle value, which I say the 100% value, is the assumption that was used in that table 1. If you recall, the labor cost is 2,500 per day. The batches per day is 8 batches, if you recall. The cost of the dry dilis is 400 pesos per kilogram. And the vacuum fried dilis per batch was 10 kilo per batch. So when this is done, so what happens is to determine the sensitivity is what happens if you decrease the labor cost by from 2,005 to 2,000 pesos per day. So it's a 20% decrease. So as a result, your profit will increase because your labor cost is lower. So the labor cost increased to 1.77 million, which therefore give a positive change of 115,500. It means for that change in labor cost from 2005 to 2000, you'll make an extra profit of 115,500 per year. For the rate of return, remember that the original rate of return at 2,500 per day is 136.64%. Then if your labor cost is decreased to 2,000 per day, then you'll get a 145.48% rate of return, which is therefore a positive rate of change of positive 8.84%. And this is good. So meaning your rate of return increased even further. And also your payback period, remember the original assumption of 2005, the payback period there is 0.73 year. It would even decrease to 0.69 year, meaning about 0.7 of 12. That's about just a little over 8 months as well. And the break-even price will decrease from 157 to, I rounded up the 156.64 to 157. And if your labor cost is 2,005 per day to 2,000, then the break-even price will decrease to 155. So therefore, you'll get greater profit if the break-even price is lower. So what happened if it is the batches per day? For the batches per day, I mentioned this at the previous slide, that your objective is to have your batches per day higher. So for the labor cost, you want it lower. For the batches per day, you want it higher. So our assumption is 8 batches per day. So if it is possible to increase the batches per day to 9, even just one batch, so you are able to squeeze in an extra batch within the 8-hour day operation. So if that happens, then you'll get an extra, because the gross profit of that will now become 3.194 million. So that is an increase of 1.54 million. So that's quite a big increase. And accordingly, your rate of return increased from 136.6 to 254.49, or an increase of 117.85%, which is again good. And the payback period is even shorter, only 0.39 of a year. So that's like 0.4 of 12, about, or just less than 5 months. And the break-even price decreased to even 139 per pack. So that means, because the break-even price is much lower, if you are just selling at 175 pesos per 175 pesos per pack, more profit will result, and that is shown by that 1.54 million of profit on top of the original 1.654 million profit. Okay, let's go now to the cost of dried dilis. So meaning this is the price of the dried dilis that you process per kilogram. So remember, our first, the previous assumption is 400 pesos per kilogram. I actually look at Shopee Philippines and Lazada Philippines. The lowest price dried dilis there is about a little over 300 pesos. So like this one here. So if the price of the dried dilis is 311 from the 400, then your profit will increase because your raw material is lower in price. So it will increase your profit to 3.299 million, or an increase further to your profit of 1.644 million. And your rate of return has increased also to 62.5%, or a change of 100, wait a minute, 117. No, wait a minute, where is it? 125.87%. So 1.64 million, 644 million of change in profit, and your rate of return is also increased considerably as well. And then your payback period also decreased considerably from 0.73 to 0.28 year, or about 0.3 of 12, less than 4 months. You can get back your capital cost already. And 0.35, yeah, 0.35 per year. And then your break-even price decreased to 134 pesos per pack. Again, much cheaper. Break-even price, more profit that would result. So for the fourth factor, the vacuum fried dilis per batch. Okay, our assumption was 10 kilos per kilogram. So if it is possible to squeeze in more product, more dried dilis in the basket instead of just 10 kilos, let's say you are able to squeeze in 11 kilogram. So if you are able to squeeze in 11 kilogram, then your profit will increase from 1.654 million to 2.866 million, or an increase, a change of 1.212 million. Then your rate of return also increased considerably from 136 to 230.92%. And your payback period decreased from 0.73 to 0.43, so shorter. And the price per pack is 143 pesos per pack. So again, lower price of the break-even price, more profit that would result. Because all of this here assume that you are still selling at 175 pesos per pack. Next slide, please. Table 2A, 2B. Oh, I think you jumped too much. Okay, 2B. So 2B, these are the remaining factors: product yield, price of vacuum fried dilis per pack, and the cost of the container, of the 5-liter container of cooking oil. So remember, our original assumption of product yield of 40% is 40%. So if it is possible that your product yield will even increase to 45%, how will this happen? This will happen by, if you have a good dried product that you bought, meaning it is well properly dried, so it has much lower moisture, so therefore your yield will even increase further if you have a properly dried dilis. So when that happens, even just a 5% increase in yield will bring your profit from 1.654 million to 3.194 million, or an increase of 1.54 million. So quite a big. And your rate of return will increase to 254.49%, or a change of about 117.85%. And your payback period will decrease to 0.39 per year. So much shorter. So 0.39, or about 0.4. 12 months is 4.8 months. So less than 5 months. And again, the price per pack, the break-even price is 139 per pack. So the sixth factor is the price of the vacuum fried dilis. Remember, in all other comparison, it was assumed that the price of the vacuum fried dilis is 175 per pack, 175 pesos per pack. So your objective is if you can sell it higher. So if you are able to increase your price to 190 pesos per pack, then your profit will increase from 1.654 million to 2.71 million, or an what is this? Yeah. So that's an increase of 1.056 million on top of that. And then your rate of return is 217% from 136, so it's a positive change. And the payback period again is shorter, 0.46 of a year, 0.5 of 12, about 6 months. And but the break-even price for all of this is still at 157, or to be exact, 156.64 pesos per pack, because the assumption here is the price is 175, so it's the same. And then the last factor is, what if the cost of the container of oil will decrease from 500 pesos per container to 400, which is advantageous because your raw material will go down. So as a result, your profit will increase from 1.654 million to 1.987 million, or an increase of 332,640 pesos. Your rate of return of capital cost will increase to 162%, or an increase of about 25%, 0.45. And your your payback period will be a little bit shorter, from 0.73 to 0.62, and your break-even price will go down to 152. So what happens now after that? So we have the next slide now? Okay, so here's the first assumption, the first finding. Firstly, when the labor cost decreased from 2,500 pesos to 2,000, or meaning it's 80% of the original labor cost, the profit and rate of return increases, but the payback period and break-even price decreases, as you have seen, as I explained earlier. Secondly, when the cost of the dry dilis is decreased from 400 to 311 pesos per kilogram, or a decrease to about 77.8%, the profit and rate of return also increases, but the payback period and break-even price decreases, which is expected. Thirdly, when the cost of containers of cooking oil is decreased from 500 pesos per container to 400 pesos per container, or an 80% of the original price, again, the profit and rate of return increases, but the payback period and break-even price decreases. So all these economic indicators favor lower values for these three factors, so which is understandable. So because, as we know, the lower the labor cost, the more profit you will have. The lower the price of the cost of dry dilis, the more profit you will have. And of course, when the price per container of cooking oil decrease, again, the higher will be your profit. So the cost of dry dilis. So among these three factors, the cost of the dry dilis is the most important among the factors, since it gives the highest profit of 1.644 million. If you refer back to, I think this is table 2A. So that was a 1.644 million increase in profit. The rate of return increase in rate of return to 125.86%. The payback period is to about 0.35 years only, decreased by 0.35, and the break-even price decreased by negative by 23 pesos per pack. Now, next slide, please. So when the batches per day is increased from 8 to 9 batches, remember, I think this is table 2A also. So from 8 batches, you are able to squeeze in another batch in a day. So the profit and the rate of return increases, but the payback period and the break-even price decreases. Then when the amount of vacuum fried dilis per batch is increased from 10, you are able to squeeze in an extra 1 kilo to 11 kilos. The profit and rate of return increases, but the payback period and break-even price decreases. When the product yield is increased from 40% to 45%, the profit and rate of return increases, but the payback period and break-even price decreases. And lastly, when the price of vacuum fried dilis per pack is increased from 175 pesos per pack to 190 pesos per pack, the profit and return rate of return increases also, but the payback period decreases. But the break-even price did not change, if you recall table 2B. So on all these economic indicators favor lower values for these 4 factors. And among these 4 factors, the batches per day and product yield were the most important factors. So meaning the batches per day, that means if you are able to squeeze in more batches in a day instead of 8, you can bring it to 9. And also the product yield. As I've said, the product yield it's possible to have a product yield higher if you have a good, well-dried dilis. Because take note, if you buy dried dilis that are not properly dried, then it's also possible that your product yield will decrease, and therefore the profitability of your process will be compromised. So that would give an increase in profit to 1.540 million, and the rate of return increased by 117.85%. The payback period will decrease by 0.35 years, and the break-even price decreased by minus 18%. If we compare these 2 batches, so the profit is 1.54, but if you recall, the cost of dry dilis will even give a much greater profit to 1.644 million. So this one. So among the 7 factors, it seems that the cost of the dry dilis is the most important factor. And so if you are processing, so it is best that you try to find the cheapest dry dilis that you can get in the market, because it would really drive up your profit considerably. So with that, I'll end my presentation. Thank you very much for your time listening, and I'm now ready for your questions and clarifications. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Lemuel. So again, everyone, we will be going ahead and taking some time for the questions now. So just a reminder, please be sure to type in your questions into the chat box and we'll address them shortly. So while people are still preparing their questions, remember, or just a reminder, please don't forget to like and follow the Facebook page of FoodStep Consulting for more updates and posts, including announcements on webinars like the one we had for today. Thank you. Okay, so we have our first question from Yora Dil. Sir, the question is, how much of the oil gets wasted for every batch?
Okay. I forget to mention that this is based on my experience actually. When I was doing vacuum frying of seafoods here in New Zealand at Lincoln University, we are able to, about 5 to 10% of the oil get carried over with the product, and also some of this gets sucked into the vacuum pump. And then after 1 year, 1 week of operation, you will keep on topping up. But at the end of 2 weeks, I think, you need to replace a new batch of oil. And what's good, the used up oil can still be sold as a second class or a lower quality oil, but it's still good for frying. So in my assumption, actually, I assume there that you get a certain percentage of the oil. And this is what really happened, because I remember when I was doing a consulting back in Cebu, they were doing some vacuum frying of mango. Vacuum frying of jackfruit. After several batches of vacuum frying, and the oil starts to sort of get reddish in color, they will replace it with a new oil. But they were able to sell this oil. And a lot of people are buying this used oil because it is still good for frying. And also because this oil was not heated up at a very high temperature. Unlike ordinary frying that we're doing, usually the temperature there is about 140 to 160 or even as high as 200 degrees centigrade. So therefore, the oil will deteriorate faster. But for vacuum frying, it's only around 100 degrees or less. So your oil will deteriorate less. What's only the drawback is there are some residues that settle at the bottom of the oil, but that could just be filtered. So yeah. So in my cost and return, that has been taken into consideration, that you will have to lose some oil, so you'll need to top up during the operation. But that's been taken care in the calculations. Thank you for that good question. Oh, Yuradil. I think she's my former student back at.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I'm. Sir.
Okay. Yes. Iba na apelido.
Iba na, sir. And we have an SME in Bohol that's actually into fried dilis. So I'm planning of proposing the project to her. But is it okay to ask for a copy of your presentation, sir?
Okay, yeah. So you're doing vacuum frying of dilis?
Not yet, but our
just the ordinary frying.
Yes, and we want her to shift into vacuum frying, but she has to appreciate and see the beauty of vacuum frying first. I was not able to invite her with your webinar today.
By the way, Yuradel, were you able to attend that first webinar I have on vacuum fried?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So if you recall that vacuum fried fruits, it's a little bit tricky there because you have to freeze your raw material. What's good
but
about
this one
is it's you just buy the dried dilis or bolina already in the market, and you can just store it at room temperature. No need of freezing facility. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's
sir,
why
I have another follow-up question. Have you established the moisture content of the dried dilis, or that was not part of your study?
That is easy, but because I've not tried actual dried dilis, because what I did here were frozen seafood.
Okay.
No, walang available dito.
Yes, okay, sir.
But I presume it's around 5%. I know it's going to be very low.
Yes. Okay, sir.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Sir Lem.
Sige, next question.
Okay, everyone. So if you have any questions, again, you can just type that in the chat box so we can address your questions shortly after.
Eurodel, before I forget, can you send me your email?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'll send it to you.
You can send it in Messenger.
Sige, sir.
Friends naman siguro tayo sa FB.
Yes, and I'll be in contact with you for future projects with DTI. Maybe next year, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully, I can already visit the Philippines. COVID na to.
COVID pa, sir.
Yeah.
But the numbers are going down, so it's getting better na. Sige, sir, I'll send you my email, sir.
Okay, just send me that. I will send you the person return.
Sige, sir, Lem. Okay, thank you.
Any more questions?
Okay, we're still waiting for questions.
I saw Maripe. Is she still around?
Okay.
Maripe Rose, Pilapad. You are still around there?
Okay, sir. Sir, we have a question from Mike Anthony. So he's asking, aside from asking of a copy of the presentation. Oh, okay. So apparently Mike Anthony only just arrived just recently. So Mike Anthony, don't worry. We will be posting this webinar on YouTube so that you can catch up with the webinar in case you missed. All right, for anyone else, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to type in the chat box so we can address your questions. Thank you.
Not too many questions. It's either everyone understood or everyone didn't understand at all. Kaya walang question.
Sir, what type of oil is suitable for vacuum frying?
Oh, the one we use were canola oil or
Mahal.
Here it's cheaper. But probably in
Okay.
the Philippines, vegetable oil will do. That's
Yeah,
what
will do.
we use.
Okay.
Meaning that's the actually coconut oil that have been deodorized, so it's doesn't have any more smell. So yeah. Well, the cheapest oil that you can get.
And one more thing, sir. During processing, what do you think would be the part where you have a high maintenance cost? Like, is the machine have that high maintenance cost or?
Oh, I forgot to mention the vacuum pump. Every so often, you will need to change the oil. The vacuum pump oil needs to be changed because, as I've said, there are some carryover oil from the chamber, but at the same time, some moisture. So it will go to the vacuum pump, and that would turn milkish in color instead of just oil. So I think so that's why there is that assumption on repair and maintenance. I think you just top it up. You just top it up also every end of the week or at the start of the week's processing. Yeah. So that's the maintenance that the others. No, I think it's just so there is cooking oil, there is vacuum pump oil.
Yeah. For the maintenance of the machine.
Yeah, because in order for the vacuum to be maintained, you need to have a clean oil circulating the vacuum pump.
But that's the oil for the vacuum, sir, is available lang locally.
It's just an engine oil. Just
just like the vehicle
engine.
cars.
Yeah.
Okay. Sige.
Okay, so Dr. Lemuel, we have a question from Melva. They're asking about the shelf life of the dilis when it's vacuum fried. They're asking about the shelf life.
I'd say at least 6 months, depending on the packaging. So if your packaging is aluminum laminate, yeah, so at least 6 months. But if your packaging is just thick plastic, probably it's about a little over 3 months. So it really depends on the packaging material you use. Because the product itself, as long as you can maintain the dried product, then it can last longer. Actually, it could even be as long as 1 year, but I'm not 100%. Maybe, except if, like here in New Zealand, they put in oxygen scavengers on inside the fried product, and that would further increase the shelf life. So as an oxygen scavenger is something that will absorb any leftover oxygen inside the product. So with that, you could even, or you can do a nitrogen plus packaging. So when you pack your product, you try to squish out all the air that goes in and replace it with nitrogen. Very much to, if you recall the uh, snacks products like the Jack and Jill, you notice that those are bulging. The bulging there is due to the nitrogen inside the pack. So if you are able to have that facility, then you can probably even have a 1 year shelf life. But of course, it will cost more to have that extra equipment. So if you just use an ordinary aluminum laminate and just the standard sealer, I'd say about 6 months.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. So before we proceed to the two questions, I remind everyone to please fill up the form through the link that we shared in the chat box so that we can get your feedback and also send your e-certificates of the webinar at a later time. Thank you. Okay, so we do have a question from Arnold. Dr. Lemuel, he's asking about the countries that have done vacuum frying of dilis or any other seafood.
I know for one, there are already some in China and some in Thailand. But a lot in the Asian countries are mostly fruits and vegetables. But I know there are some products coming out from China. So these are vacuum fried seafoods. Even in the Philippines, I actually found that there are a number of cooperatives or some universities already that have bought vacuum fryer from the UST, and I think they are able to produce in limited amounts. So remember the vacuum fried tahong or mussel and vacuum fried clam or barinday and vacuum fried dilis that I shown, those are from the Philippines, but very limited amount because I could not even see them in Shopee Philippines, the online store, and Lazada Philippines. So that shows only that there is a very limited amount available there. So it's probably just sold locally. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. So the next question we have is from Francis. Francis is asking about how much is the machine cost regarding the capacity or per batch?
As I've said, the key equipment there is the vacuum fryer, and the one I am recommending is to get it from the UST, and the price of the machine is around 1 million, and as I've said, it has a 10-kilo capacity. So meaning the basket can put in, if you want bigger capacity, like more than 10 kilos or even as much as 1,000 kilos, there are already a lot of vacuum frying machine available from China. So these are, but of course you have to import it. But at least if it's from the UST, then you can just order it locally. So, and if you recall, the total capital cost that I've shown there is 1.5 1.306 million. So the extra amount there is for the other pieces of equipment like the continuous band sealer, the weighing machine, the working tables, the steel cabinets where you can store the products and so on. So a total of about 1.306 million is for the capital cost of the equipment. And then you'll need an operating cost of about 3 months or about almost I think 2.7 million, a 3-month operating cost. And after 3 months, as I've said, it becomes a self-sustaining because within the 3 months, you'll have a revenue higher than the operating cost. So if you can sell all those products, then you can use it for the succeeding 3 months of operation. So that becomes continuous. So that's why I said there that the project cost will cost about just a little over 4 million, because 1.3 million for the equipment and about 2.7 million for the operating cost, 3 months operating cost. That's it. Did I answer your question?
Okay, hopefully your question was answered, Francis. So thank you very much for that question. Aside from Francis, is there anybody else who would like to ask Dr. Lemuel any questions regarding the webinar? Please don't hesitate to put that in the chat box. Okay, so we have a follow-up question from Francis. So are there any source to buy a cheaper machine? The overall CapEx and OpEx is very high for MSME. So how do we recover the amortization?
Oh, I think the amortization for that, I think I've already shown there that the payback period is 0.73 years. So that's just about a little over 8 months. So you can already recover your 1.306 million in about a little over 8 months.
Okay. So how about the other question, sir, about are there or do you know any other sources to buy a cheaper machine?
For that, I'm not sure because I only know about the UST. So before, when I was back at the Visayas State University, I was able to collaborate with an engineer who is a manufacturer of dryers. So we collaborated and we come up with our own design of a vacuum fryer. In fact, at BSU, the one I designed together with that engineer is still sitting there in the pilot plant. But I think the engineer already died because he's quite old. And I don't know if there's anybody fabricating this machine in Leyte. So that's why I only recommend the 10 kilo capacity. And besides, if in order to make it more profitable, the higher the volume that you process, the faster will be your recovery of your capital. Because if you use a smaller scale, then the profitability will also be impacted by that. So the 10 kilogram capacity, even if the price of the vacuum fryer is 1 million plus the extra other pieces of equipment, you can recover it in less than a year. And I've shown you there that the profit for a 1-year operation at the end of the year, you'll get already a 1.6 million. That's already including the recovery of the payment for the capital cost. So this is a very profitable enterprise actually, because the payback period is less than a year.
Okay. All right, sir. One more follow-up from Francis. So what would be the estimated percentage amortization cost from the product cost?
I could not fully answer that because it's not really my expertise to work out the amortization. But if you want, you can work it out based on the cost of the capital cost needed is 1.306 million, and then I've shown the. So if you can they have access of this webinar later on?
Yes, sir, they have.
Yeah, because you can extract those data from especially table 1. So you are able to extract it and you can do your own amortization. I've not carried out that kind of analysis.
It's okay. Yeah, so Francis was just mentioning that he's actually developing a low-cost vacuum fryer for lab use, which is like around 1.5 kilogram per batch. And for commercial use, that's around 10 kilogram per batch at target
Okay,
cost of ownership of
I just
100.
remembered I saw that a former colleague of mine at Visayas State University, he was able, I think, to design a small scale vacuum fryer. I'll give you the name. You can contact at Visayas State University. It's Dr. Daniel Tan. Because I think he was able to come up with a smaller size machine for laboratory use. And I think they even won a prize for that invention. So if you can contact Visayas State University, Dr. Daniel Tan, I don't know what is his email, but you can probably just contact the issue and find him in their directory.
All right.
Is that fine, Francis?
Yeah, that the Francis made said that it's okay. And thanks you for the information. So one more question for Yoradil. He's asking about the estimated useful life of the vacuum fryer.
I'm not 100% sure, but I think we have to ask the OST. But I presume probably at least 5 years. Because that's why, if you recall, in my assumption there, you'll do only an 11 months operation. So the remaining 1 month there will be for maintenance. And even for each month, there is an extra 2 days because I only assume 20 days per month. But roughly it's about 22 days per month. So there will be, so that you can carry out maintenance of the machine. So if it's properly maintained, I think at least 5 years. I'm not 100% if you can reach 10 years, but if you probably communicate with the OST, then they will probably be in the better position to answer that. Did it answer your question, Yuradil?
Yes, sir.
All right. So again, everyone, thank you very much for coming and we appreciate you being here. Please, one last reminder regarding the links. So please fill up the form through the link that we provided in the chat box so that we can get your feedback and also send your e-certificates. And again, please don't forget to follow and like the Facebook page. And since we're wrapping up, thank you again, sir, or Dr. Lemuel, for the webinar today. And thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, so we will be posting the video again, link on YouTube in the Facebook page, and please just tune in. Okay.
Thank you.